Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Thursday everybody. China's so-called Beidaihe meeting, an annual gathering of China's top leadership, appears to be over, with Premier Li Qiang reappearing yesterday, Wednesday, to chair the second plenary meeting of the State Council. The first was back in March. Quote, I believe that holding the State Council plenary sessions within less than 4 months of each other is fairly unprecedented and could be seen as a sign of the growing concern over the state of the economy. Some years there are 2 of these sessions. 2023 has already had 3, including Li Keqiang's final one in February. End quote. Li's speech at the meeting was interesting. The 5% GDP growth target appears to still be in place, suggesting that Beijing is still willing to use stimulus, albeit sparingly. The Premier also expressed, quote, we must organically combine supervision and service, security and development promotion, think more about development and assist enterprises more, end quote, causing some commentators to speculate that maybe Beijing wants to focus more on economic development more than security considerations, for the time being at least. My personal view is that while this is possible, one line from a readout isn't sufficient to jump to such conclusions, especially as the security zeitgeist is so potent in Beijing these days. But we should at least take note of it. Li Qiang also stressed the need to focus on expanding domestic demand. Indeed, this is a common statement we've been hearing from Beijing for months now. Chinese leadership appears to be making it clear, however, that stimulus paid to consumers and households directly, as some economists have advocated, is not an option. Yesterday, the authoritative party outlet, the Study Times, published an article unambiguously titled, Clarifying 8 Misconceptions About Expanding Domestic Demand. The content of the article was equally unambiguous. Quote, some argue that China should directly distribute cash like some countries to stimulate consumer demand. Although this method can have some effect, the cost is too high, making it fundamentally unfeasible in China. The habits, consumption levels, and saving patterns of Chinese residents are quite different from those in developed countries like the United States. If 1,000 yuan was distributed to each person, it would require about 1.4 trillion yuan. But how much could this really stimulate consumption? The pandemic has to some extent strengthened residents' precautionary motives, making consumption more conservative. This would inevitably lead to inefficient use of valuable fiscal resources. End quote. Next up, as we all know, northern China has been seeing massive flooding over the last few weeks. It all started when Typhoon Doksuri hit the country, resulting in Beijing seeing its heaviest rainfall in 140 years. We did a video when this flooding first devastated parts of Hebei and Beijing. It is now worth re-examining some of this and discussing implications. While these floods have caused significant damage and pockets of social discontent, we must be cautious not to exaggerate these effects domestically. The Chinese state has the tools to easily manage any social anger rising from the flooding, and indeed experienced much more challenging periods of social discontent at the beginning of the pandemic and in the final months of zero COVID last year. The economic damage to the worst areas affected by the flooding has been devastating. But when viewed at the national level, the damage is only modest to moderate. There is one implication of concern, however, that is the effect the flooding will have on global rice markets. In a recent report, Fitch Ratings said that these markets could come under further strain, expressing, quote, heavy rain in China's grain-producing northeastern region that will reduce yields is likely to put upward pressure on already high global rice prices. This will lift China's domestic grain prices and likely higher imports in the second half of 2023 to partially offset the potential yield loss, end quote, adding that the country may need to look to import more rice if its own harvests fall short, and that this could further drive global rice prices even higher. This also comes as India, responsible for 40% of the global rice trade, banned non-basmati white rice exports last month in an effort to save water as a result of low rainfall. Sometimes irony can be very cruel. This all will have serious knock-on effects not just for Chinese households in poorer regions, but on low-income households around the world. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization All Rice Price Index, global rice prices have already surged to their highest in close to 12 years. The Fitch report writes too that corn and soybean yields in China will also be negatively affected. Next up, the Chinese economy. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed today's episode of China Update, as always, don't forget to hit that like button, liking, sharing with people who you think would enjoy this sort of content, and subscribing are all massive helps for the channel. And as always, anyone who can go the extra mile and help me keep China Update financially sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. Thank you so much everybody for the ongoing support. Finally, for today, we move on to the Chinese economy, and we have two concerning developments to cover. One related to the housing crisis, the other related to growing anxiety around the financial sector. Yesterday, Wednesday, the National Bureau of Statistics published new official data on home prices. According to the official numbers, China home prices dropped for a second month in July. New home prices in 70 cities tracked by the government fell 0.23% last month, on month. In June, they declined 0.06%. In the secondary market, prices slid 0.47%. Home prices are very politically sensitive in China, and local governments have implemented policies to impose indirect price floors on home prices. So any official drop in prices at all is significant. The price decline was widespread too, with 49 cities of the 70 tracked new home values dropping month on month, the most of any given month this year to date. Quote, once markets are driven primarily by speculative buying, it becomes almost impossible to stabilize them because buyers will only buy on rising price expectations. End quote. According to Bloomberg calculations on official data published on Tuesday, the value of residential sales nationwide tumbled 43% in July, month on month, to 654.5 billion yuan, approximately $90 billion, the weakest monthly sales in almost 6 years. Next up, we remember from earlier this week, Zhongzhi International Trust, part of the Zhongzhi Enterprise Group, missed payments on some of their trust products, leading to fears of contagion across the financial system. The under-the-radar group, often called China's Blackstone by local media, operates at the heart of China's once high-flying shadow banking market. This is a story that we need to follow closely. In a note this week, Ting Lu, chief China economist at Nomura Group, speaking on the issues at Zhongzhi, explained that the property crisis is spreading into the financial sector, warning, quote, the markets still underestimate the aftermath of the significant collapse in China's property sector. End quote. And to quote Pettis one further time, he argues in a separate observation made today that no one should be particularly surprised. Quote, it may seem like terrible luck and amazing coincidence that so many things are going wrong in the Chinese economy at the same time, but of course it is not coincidence at all. This is how systemic imbalances work themselves out. End quote. Yesterday, Wednesday, retail investors with exposure to the massive financial conglomerate Zhongzhi sought to lodge formal complaints with authorities in Beijing. UK-based The Financial Times writes that several small groups of creditors who had come to deliver a letter to the China National Administration of Financial Regulation were denied entry to the building by police. One woman is reported to have told the outlet, quote, I've been here twice and haven't made any progress. End quote. On the same day, Wednesday, US financial media outlet Bloomberg reported, based on leaks, that the board secretary of Zhongzhi International Trust, in a meeting earlier this week, told investors that at least 30 products are now overdue and that Zhongzhi has halted redemptions on some short-term installments. Of course, this is not good. Bloomberg reports that the board secretary expressed, quote, we don't have an immediate plan to cover the payments since our short-term liquidity has suddenly dried up, end quote, and that the company is facing a, quote, tsunami of questions from investors and their own wealth managers, End quote. In a separate note to the one we just quoted, Nomura Group said that a wave of defaults on trust products could cause, quote, substantial ripple effects, end quote, for China's broader economy, as losses suffered by individual investors would have, quote, an acute impact on consumption, end quote. Arthur Kruber, head of research at Beijing-based Gavical Dragonomics, observed on All This Drama this week, quote, this is something where the problems are probably not going to be confined to this individual trust, but are going to spread to or become more evident in the trust industry as a whole, end quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a wonderful Thursday, and I will see you all tomorrow.